All right, welcome everyone. This will be a short 1-hour webinar on Facelift, what it is, what resources you have at your disposal regarding it, what you would need to do, and then I'll answer some questions I've received in the past, as well as give you guys an opportunity to ask more additional ones. This will be recorded and posted on the CET Developer YouTube channel. So if you need to go back to see any bits of it, it will be available thereafter, as well as for anyone who was not able to attend today. This is a webinar for extension and project members with an emphasis on developers, not necessarily for users to do anything regarding Facelift. So this will be a bit more technical than like a user training webinar on Facelift. All right, so today we're going to cover a few things. First, I'll go over Facelift, just what it is and a few details about it. I'll go over the timeline for everything, when certain deadlines are, when certain extension review and annual review deadlines are happening, when extensions actually have to be facelifted by, etc. Then we'll go over the design documentation and how to read it and how to use it, and where you can find it. Then I have a few new resources that are coming out in 16.0 that will be very useful for any facelift migration work that any developers need to do. Then I'll go over some questions that I've received in the past about facelifting, and then we'll make some time for any questions that people in the call may have. So first, I'll just go over what facelift is. So facelift is the term Configurer uses to refer to the UI UX refresh that we do. We've done this once before when we went from, as you can see here, this was our very first facelift when we have CET 2.6 on the left and 14.0 on the right. And now we will be doing this again with more modern UI UX design elements. So the reason the configurer is doing this is basically to create a new visual design. We want to update CET to modern user expectations. We have done lots of research on modern design paradigms and what people nowadays expect from a piece of software and how they interact with it. And we needed to update CET to a lot of technological advancements, just to basically get CET up to date and looking fresh and new and basically looking like a modern piece of software. We wanted to update it so it is a lot more stable. So on the back end, there were a pretty large refresh of a lot of UI and UX code in order to increase the software's stability and performance. Lastly, we wanted to write and release a very definitive set of UX guidelines. We'll talk about those specifically in a little bit, but we wanted to basically create a cohesive set of rules or guidelines and elements that are of high quality and more cohesive across all extensions, both configure-owned extensions and externally owned extensions. A lot of the feedback Configura gets is users who want a more standard experience. A lot of times if they go and flip between extensions, they're going to find a lot of different approaches and layouts, and everything looks different and works differently, and that makes a pretty steep learning curve, and they spend a lot of their time, their time is very precious and they have a lot to do. So we want to minimize that and make the experience a lot smoother for them. This is a link Configura has created just to show the changes. So you can take the slider, anyone can go here, it's just configure.compare. Basically shows, so this right here is CET 15.0 without any of the new UI, and then you can see what it would look like if it was facelifted. So visually it is fully updated, but on the back end, it is also updated. All right, here are a bunch of example changes. This is not nearly all of them. This is just me giving examples of things that have happened with the facelift. This image, as well as a more complete list of everything that has changed, can be found at our design documentation and in the migration guides, both of which can be accessed from the developer portal. But this is just like a quick, hey, here are some examples of things that are changing during the facelift process. So let us look at the design documentation. So this link right here, design.configura.com, is basically the complete documentation that Configure has written to help everyone facelift their extensions. Right, we have put this together just to outline everything that developers, catalog content specialists, and extension owners, so they can have a complete idea of what Configure expects and provides in terms of UI and UX and how to create your extension. It includes everything from super specific core structures, such as a header and how to implement it and what it's called, to very general things, such as like design principles, things like that you'll want to consider when you are lifting an extension, that how to take into account the user experience and what kind of ideas you should keep in mind when designing the layout or how the user should interact with your extension. I'm not going to go through every single one of these pages top to bottom, but it is worth a top to bottom read through. It would take quite a long time if I were to go through them all, but there's a lot of really good stuff here. As far as I have found, it is almost complete. Every once in a while, we'll find something or hear about something that wasn't included, and then as soon as that happens, we immediately get it included. But if you do find anything that is not included, let me know, but I'll get more into that later. Anything that does change in here over time does get logged in this changelog page here. You can see, hey, on April 9th, these are the things that are going to change in this documentation. So if you do a full read through and you're very familiar with it all and you want to know if it is different, and you come back a couple weeks later, you want to know if anything has changed and you don't want to read it through completely again, you can go to this changelog and see if anything has actually changed. One of the most important parts of this is our 4 design principles: empathy, keeping things simple, keeping things familiar, and making sure that users have the power to do what they need. Empathy means we are designing for real user needs and with their experience prioritized. The users are the reason we make this software, and the reason that these extensions are made, and we want to make their lives easier as much as we possibly can. So that should be your primary goal whenever you are designing your extension. Simplicity just means we need to keep productivity high by removing any things that could cause friction in a user's workflow. Familiar means we just want patterns to feel intuitive and predictable, especially across extensions. And then empower, we just want to give the users the tools to grow and stay in control. I'll go over a couple of really useful things in here, but I'm not going to go over everything. One of the most useful ones I have found is this icon library. Configura has a library of hundreds of pre-created SVG, PNG icons that all extensions are available to use, and more being added all the time. If you have requests for any of them, you can request them. These are free to use for all extensions, and then the more you use the predetermined icons, the more things will be familiar to users and consistent across extensions. And those can be found here, downloaded, and used in any extension. Similar thing with colors. There are standardized colors here, which are very useful and we recommend using, but it is not required. You can find them all here along with their hex codes. There is super technical pages such as this one. This is the tutorial of going and actually facelifting an extension. This goes top to bottom how to facelift Fika and shows how we at Configure would approach facelifting an extension. If you need to search for things, there's also a search here. Say if I wanted to search for headers because I want more information on that, I could search, take me there, and I can see, oh, I would like to be able to add a scheme to my header, a scheme button here, and I can go through. Oh, I can see things about the scheme button here, and I can see how to multiple different ways of how to add a scheme to my header. So going through this documentation top to bottom will be very useful. You'll figure out what actually is available, everything that is included. And if you do find something that is missing, you can either let dev support know or use this feedback button here. This will create a pop-up. All it does technically is create a dev support ticket on the back end, but when this button is used, you don't actually have to leave the page, which can be very nice. So this is our complete documentation. It is available at design.configure.com, but if you do type that in, it will redirect to DevDocs. If you're wondering what these other tabs are, these ones are in development. They are not released yet. I am the person at Configure in charge of documentation, and we are not going to release those until we've vetted all the information in them. And that is actively being done right now. So we will make a post in developer news as soon as these are ready to be released and accessed. So this link to the design documentation can be found on the CET developer and QA menus on the developer portal. Other new things that are, I think a lot of people have already started facelifting like months ago. These are pretty new. The annual review in November is going to be updated. They'll assess lots of UI and UX elements, things like buttons or header, accessibility, and then these are the annual reviews, not the extension reviews. The extension reviews are the reviews of an extension that are on demand. You basically go to Configura and a whole team goes through, does extensive testing on usability and performance and UI and goes through it all. Extension reviews, if they can result in a failure and making an extension not be willing to be released. This update to annual review is going to now include facelift information, but it will not ever result, I don't know about ever, but for as far as I know, at least up until November, this will not result in extensions being rejected. It'll mainly be tickets like, hey, you guys are not up to date here. We recommend these changes. Here are resources for doing that. And here is the timeline for updating the elements of your extension that do not comply with our design guidelines. Another thing that recently being added to the 16.0 beta branch for core is the branding and extension headers. A lot of extensions have an image at the top of their extension, and the headers as they were before this did not allow for such a branding image there. And now that is possible as of 16.0 beta on Monday. And so the size is limited to this, so they will have to be smaller in terms of height, and that is to reduce scrolling for users because users do not like scrolling. And if you have a large header with a large image there and then some like basic tools, you can end up taking up half of your toolbox library just with non-products. And that's what we are trying to minimize. Additionally, product buttons can now have 2-line labels, and there are guidelines you can find for wrapping and how to approach that and make them look consistent in the design docs. And let's see. Oh, this got missed. All right. Okay. So this is a pretty important new update. This is only as of Monday. So anyone who doesn't attend this webinar, I'm going to be posting, or possibly Paul Jones, onto our developer news about this, because this is a pretty big deal and will hopefully be a really good resource. But basically, in version 16.0 beta, there is now going, this QA Tools internal extension will now be available to external developers and external QAs, external catalog specialists, and it contains a lot of really useful examples for Facelift UI. So let me flip back to CET. All right, so it is part of the QA Tools internal extension, which is not internal anymore. You can find these if you go to QA. So this is the main QA tab, and then there's an additional 4 tabs below this. The first one is just facelift test tools. There are multiple tabs here. There's a lot of different examples in here. Anything from the pop-up here, adding tips, changing how buttons look, and changing. There's a lot of examples for almost, I think, for every single UI element that is possible in CET, all of them facelifted. So this should be a really good useful for having your libraries facelifted. And if you want examples of anything, there are settings you can try. This is a pretty useful button right here. This brings up a window with every single type of user input style that's possible. And you can go and try them all out. There is here, there are all the different message types, examples of truncation. If something is not recommended, it's usually called out. I know we do not recommend left-aligned toggles, and so it'll say not recommended here. Different layouts. There is an example of all the buttons in this second tab here. You can go through and try all sorts of different button types and sizes with labels. If I go to medium, we can see here are a lot of examples. Do you want them snapper limbs, animation limbs, callback limbs? Do you want labels? Do you want them to be expandable? Do you want the labels truncated? What sizes do you want? Do you want SVG or PNG? And you can go through all the different sizes there. There is also one of my favorite parts of this is this extension right here. So this facelift hybrid extension. So this is an example that our internal team created. This is an example library they have made that combines automatic catalog library generation with customizations made with code. So you can go through and try everything in here. Everything that is usually called out will usually have a tip here. This says, hey, you can see the different predefined colors. So if I were to follow this and refresh, I'm now seeing the different types of tips here. One of the examples, if you switch to plants, you can notice that my background changed, and that is because it switched to the plant's view mode. So it contains an example of switching view modes when you switch tabs here. Anything that is not recommended, but we wanted an example just for our QA, will be called out saying, hey, this is prohibited. Please don't do this. This plants library is automatically created based on a catalog TOC, and then all of the changes in here are customizations made by a developer on top of that catalog library. So this is a pretty good example if you want to auto-generate your library, but then reach in as a dev with code and then customize or tweak it. And then all of those examples are called out here. So I cannot recommend enough all of these. It's basically the concept of a kitchen sink for any developers in the room who know what that is. Basically, every single possible UI element that you could want and an example of each. So if you need help doing a facelift, this will be a good one to come to. This extension, QA Tools, is license dependent on having both the QA tools extension and having access to custom developer. So make sure to go and get those. I did discover this morning that QA tools extension in the marketplace is a request access instead of just one you can grab for free. So I'm going to be going to the team and asking if we can change that. But in the meantime, feel free to request access to it and then make a ticket to dev support saying, hey, I have requested access to that. And that will ensure that you get that access quickly rather than the standard. I think we check those once every 2 weeks or something. So if you would like it sooner rather than later, just send dev support a message saying, hey, I requested access to the QA tools. Can you approve it? And you can get that sooner rather than later. I just realized I did not actually add the slide for the timelines. So let me find the timeline here and show you guys this. So the facelift timeline you can find it here in this is under new UI adoption info, and then there is this timeline available here. We are currently in 16.0. So right now there is a facelift grading system added to both extension review and annual review, but they are not like required right now. You will get, if your extension does not pass, well, your extension will not pass or fail depending on compliance with facelift guidelines. It is more you'll get tickets saying, hey, this is not up to facelift standards, consider changing these. Right now, the only changes that are happening to our old UI are just maintenance support. And once we hit 17.0, no more bug fixes, performance improvements, or anything will happen to the old UI. So old UI will be completely phased out, and now facelift will be compulsory in 17.0, which will be in May. So right now, the toggle has been removed in 16.0, and the UI is the default. There's minimal support for core tickets regarding old UI, but most things are being encouraged to step towards the new UI and the facelifted plan. In 17.0, old UI will be marked end of life. So that means if you stick with the old UI, your extensions probably will be allowed to be failed in extension and annual reviews. But that'll be next year in March and April. And then also we will no longer support or fix any old UI related issues. This timeline, if it ever does change, it will be updated in this tab here. And then that will be marked in the change log here. Right. So now I will quickly go over some questions that I have gotten myself before in terms of people being unsure about facelift things, and then I'll talk through my answers to those. And then if you guys have questions that are not included here, feel free to ask them afterwards. First, how long will it take me to facelift an extension? This one is very tough for me or Configura to answer because this is highly dependent on a lot of different factors. It depends if the extension has a lot of custom functionality and custom buttons and drop downs and layouts and such. The less customization or interesting features you have, the less time it'll take to facelift. It depends on a developer's understanding of the new UI UX and how familiar they are with the documentation and finding the answers they need there, which is one of the reasons I recommend doing a top to bottom read through of it. It depends on your product vision and then your budget to how many hours you're willing to dedicate to facelifting an extension. It depends how much time a developer has to review the guidelines and the migration guides and any changes there. It depends how long your extension is set up, or how your extension is set up in terms of sub-extensions, having multiple toolboxes. Is it pure PGC, or is it just data-driven or catalog-driven? It depends on the technical expertise of your developers, and especially it depends if you're going to recreate all new icons or not. Engaging a partner to develop and create new icons can be one of the most time-consuming parts of facelifting. We do have a lot of recommendations and guidelines regarding creation of icons and what they should look like in the design documentation. And there is the icon library, but if you choose not to use those and make your own icons, that can take quite a while. So taking all those into account, the answer will be highly different depending on the extension and the developer and the partner and what quantity of changes are going to happen to your extension. So in this case, I don't actually have a good answer, and it'll have to be figured out through trial and error and just trying yourself. What happens if we don't facelift? Like I talked about in the timeline slide, it is not compulsory until 17.0. And if you find yourself in a difficult situation and you think you can't meet the timelines described in there by Configura, we can work with you on a plan that suits your situation better, and you can contact Extension Review at that email address to continue that discussion. Current reviews for 16.0 and 16.5 will only include feedback that you should facelift and what elements need to be facelifted, and then a timeline of when to do so. And it won't actually be mandatory until 17.0 in a year. But just know that the longer you wait, the less support there will be for old UI core bugs. What if there aren't UI elements or documentation for something, a UI element that is something you use and need? If you can't find a specific component, like maybe a certain type of button, first check if there's something similar already available that could serve the same purpose. The more we use the available elements, the more consistent and maintainable everything will be. But if it is something important and we do not have it and you think it really should be there and it cannot be covered by something that does exist, let me or dev support know. Dev training and dev support are on the lookout for anything we hear and requests from external developers, and we directly contact our UI UX team with missing needs. They then handle getting that added to the core code and added to the documentation, and they've been very responsive with us. So if there's something you need that is not included, let us know. We will gladly give you assistance in using something in the meantime, or go and submit that request and let you know when it gets added and updated. If you have any questions after this, feel free to contact me. I am in charge of developer training and support. My email is katherinecook@configura.com. You can also contact developer support through our customer portal, the dev support portal there. So if you have anything else you need or questions, or you're facelifting and wondering how to do a certain portion of it and the documentation isn't enough, just contact us. We are totally here to help you. So, are there any other questions?
Yep. Hello. I have one quick question. Maybe you mentioned it and I missed that, but I was wondering, you talk about like a review and to know what is needed, but uh, where's the line between what is needed and what? Because of course with the facelift you can do multiple things, but at what point is it most really the needed part, and at what point is like more stuff to make it better but not needed?
Oh, between what's mandatory and what's just suggested?
Yeah.
That's a good question. Haven't read through the extension review guidelines in quite a while. Alexis, do you know where those are kept or who has them?
I do not personally. You can probably ask the extension review team themselves if you have a ticket that recommends things for facelift that you're not sure if it's mandatory versus needed. They're usually pretty open to replies.
True. Extension review team, I had that email in a previous slide. You can always email them and ask, hey, what about this? Will this be required or is this just suggested? You can email them and talk to them. I will go and talk to the team about where we can find a resource saying, hey, this is what gets covered in extension review, because that is a good question. And then I'm going to be posting to developer news sometime this week. And then I'll make sure to get the answer to that included in the post.
Great, thanks.
Any other questions? Oh, I see yours in the chat, Felipe. The extra extension available. So I'm assuming you are referring to the this one right here, right, Felipe? The QA. So QA tools is currently available. These extra tabs are included in 16.0 beta. So that's this branch right here, this core branch. For the marketplace, it's easy. You can either get it there or through the marketplace under QA tools. QA tools is a request access extension. So make sure to let dev support know once you do request that if you would like access to it sooner than, say, 2 weeks. And so these can be found. I think this is a sub extension of QA tools. You'll also need custom developer in order to access these because these are not tabs for users. These are just tabs for developers. Felipe, does that answer your question? Or do I need to expound? Okay. Trevor, for your question on subsection lim. I don't know of if the work is currently being done on that or not. Alexis, have you seen any tickets about that before?
Not about drawline, no.
All right. Trevor, if you would submit that to dev support, then she and I can message the team and say, hey, this was submitted. Can you guys take a look at this and give us information on what this is, on if this should be working, if there is an example somewhere, and if it needs to be fixed and when. Quinn, to get yes, so to get access to these tabs, you do need the QA tools extension, which you can find in the marketplace. It is called QA tools. The internal section contains these additional tabs. Those you will request access to them, and then it's just you request access to the parent QA tools extension, let dev support know. Then you should also get custom developer. That is the extension. It contains, let's see. I don't know if I have that one installed in this workspace, but there is custom developer. The license for accessing to these tabs is dependent on your license to custom developer, and I think that one is also available in the marketplace. Can you confirm, Alexis?
Looking at
I know that the license is dependent on that just because these tabs are not meant for users to look at and see. They are meant for only developers. And so if a user were to go here and start changing all of these settings, they could mess some things up pretty good. And we don't want them to destroy their own CET. if I look at, I'm checking on my other monitor, custom developer, right now. Alexis, is custom developer one that you get by default if you have a developer license?
I think the repo is accessible to you once you get the developer license. Yes.
I've always had it, but I know some things are different for us as configure employees than external developers.
I believe custom developer is part of getting a developer's license.
Okay. Sergio, when you activate that, are you in is your base branch 16.0 beta? And also pulled and updated since Monday? Because I know that before Monday, this was not available to externals with any licenses. And then as of Monday, it was merged in. So now the delegates are the security delegates for these tabs are now dependent on access to QA tools and custom developer. So if you don't have those, and you do not have the most recent 16.0 beta base code released as of Monday, then you won't be able to access it. Sergio, in your output, when you try to turn it on and then it gets turned off, what kind of security delegate access errors are you getting in your CM output buffer? It should tell you what thing you're missing access to. Quinn, let me read through your question here. I'm going to say my hypothesis is that custom developer is something you get by default if you have a developer license. And it's kind of like a backend sort of thing. I don't know if it's a full extension. I know dev training is a full extension. I think custom developer, you can find that in base. So it's base, custom developer, etc. That's the package. So you might just already have that. Quinn, what are you seeing in your output buffer in Emacs when you try to turn that on? You should be getting some sort of printout saying what you specifically don't have access to. Did you request access to QA tools in the marketplace? There is like QA tools. You get access to QA tools, the main tab, by default if you're a developer, I believe. And I think you need, Alexis, do you think you need to request it again in order to access the sub extension?
No, if you have access to the QA tools, the license itself, the Facelift is part of QA tools. They're just doing a security delegate to check if you have a dev license, yes?
Yeah, it looks like her printouts are saying she doesn't have access to QA tools. Quinn, can you request it in... Actually, Alexis... Oh no, Doug has access to checking against that list.
Hey, this is Derek. I
Hello, Derek.
just dropped in, but did you say this you need to be compiled in version 16.0 beta in order for this?
Yep,
Okay.
base branch version 16.0 beta. And yes, this is in your screenshot, that is the one to request.
Yeah.
But you do have it installed.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have 16.0 beta compiled at the moment. I was curious if that was what other people were experiencing too, if they're still in 15.5.
Sergio, were you able to try again? Right. The changing of the security delegates and access requirements is a change in the code, and that change only exists in the version 16.0 beta branch. So if you try and your base branch is in 15.5, then it will not work. Or if you haven't pulled 16.0 beta since Monday. All right, I would like to confirm that some of you can access this before we end. So whoever gets there first wins one internet. And Saria, this is with 16.0. Then I'm going to go and I may enlist one of you after this webinar to go and get on a call with me just to make sure. I am telling you what I've been told, and I have access to everything as a configurant. And I've been told this is the change that has happened. But since I'm not external, I have a lot more free reign to everything. So I'll get on with someone and try it out and see if we can figure out what needs to actually happen, what the exact steps are. And then when I make the post to Developer News later today or tomorrow morning, I'll include those official steps. All right. So that'll be on me, and I will make that post later today or tomorrow. In the meantime, are there any other questions? All right, we will end it there. Anyone feel free to contact dev training or dev support if you have any further questions or struggles when doing facelift, or if the documentation doesn't cover something that you need. We are here to help. Make sure to give it a full read through. I think as of 16.0, if you check out the 16.0 branch, all Configura owned extensions have been facelifted, and many are like this plants one is fully catalog TOC based. The walls one is fully PGC based. There's the hybrid extension example once we can get you guys access to it here. So you should have lots of examples of everything, which should be really useful. And then let us know what you need. Thank you everyone for attending today, and good luck, and let us know what you need. Derek, that is very interesting. Let me check my own extension details. So when I see QA tools, I see exactly what you do. It's not like a facelift extension. Just turning on QA tools internal should do it. If you try to shut it on, do you get the
Let me see.
access error?
I think, access required. Let me see one more time. Extension details. So I'll turn on QA tools internal without the abstract conveyor or walls test,
Sure, yeah.
and I still get error access required. So
All right. Well, I will go and figure that out, and then I will post a dev news, so keep an eye out today or tomorrow with this is what you actually need to do. And I will go back to who told me this information and be like, so that didn't work.
sure, Vic.
So
Sounds like you need some manufacturer extension alter ego.
I know. But as soon as I put in @configure.com and successfully sign in and like, here's everything. And so I can't figure out how to test this on my own. All right. I will get back to you all once I figure this out. Thank you for attending. I'm gonna end this now.
Sounds good. Good luck.
All right, bye guys. Good luck.